In the 1960s and 70s, Jim Swiler wore many hats at KTIB. While he is far removed from his days in Thibodeau broadcasting, his memories are as vivid as ever. Jim Swiler, how you doing today?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for calling.
Well, no problem. Let's start from the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from New Orleans. I moved down to Thibodeau in 1962 when I went to KTIB.
All righty. Now, what university did you attend?
Well, I attended UNO and Tulane University.
All righty. Now, growing up as a kid, was broadcasting always an interest of yours?
Actually, it was when I got to high school. That's when I really started in high school. And then when I got to Tulane, I started working at the student station there back in the old days, in the early 60s.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now was KTIB your first job away from the university?
No, I worked in New Orleans at old WJBW many years ago. That station now changed its call a few times now, but it was an old rock station. And I worked there for, I guess, about a year or two before I went to Thibodeau.
Okay, and what was the first year you came into KTIB?
1962.
Okay. How'd you find out about KTIB and their opening?
Well, a friend of mine had been in the area and told me about it, and I talked to Ray Sadie, who was the manager then, and went down and talked with him and just started off there.
Okay. When you first joined the station, what were your duties?
I was primarily an announcer. I used to work, I think, from noon to 6 or to sign off, whatever that was. Sometimes it was 7, sometimes it was 5, depending on the daylight hours, you know.
Mm-hmm. Of course, back then. Exactly, because back then, for the younger listeners, when KTIB was AM 630, we were only on from sunrise to sunset.
Correct.
So you had to make sure you had your monthly timetable with you to find out when that sun went down.
Correct. I did a lot of different things at the station there. You know, it was a good learning experience for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Mr. Sadie just now. Tell everybody about working with him. I understand he was a pretty solid manager.
Yeah, he was good. He was a good guy. He learned a lot working with Ray. He was also a good friend. Fought a few battles together with back in those days. Most memorable was Hurricane Betsy when we remained on the air. Ray was able to rent or borrow a generator from the company, and we two of us stayed at the transmitter. Actually, we broadcast from the transmitter out in Schriever all during the storm, even though the eye of Betsy passed right over the home and Thibodeau area. We stayed on the air from the transmitter. Actually, the wind was so strong out there, it blew the beacon off the top of the tower. So it was kind of hazardous, to say the least. The wind was so strong and the rain, the transmitter building is a cinder block building, and the water was coming right through the cinder blocks. So we wound up with about 6 inches of water in the transmitter floor, and so I broadcast most of the time sitting on a ladder to stay out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Must have been a real hectic night.
It was an interesting time.
All right. Now, there's another person, if my memory's correct, that worked at KTIB for a good long time, Marie Bacheron.
Oh, Marie, yes. Yeah, good friend. I remember her from many, many years ago. She was really a wonderful lady, and enjoyed being with Marie. Had a great voice, and she did a lot of production as well as on-air work, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to tell the listeners a story that you kind of briefly touched on when I first spoke with you, that you had mentioned to me that before he became famous on New Orleans television, that Tommy George once worked at KTIB, correct?
Right, Tommy George worked at KTIB. He was there just before I got there, and I did get to meet him a couple of times. He was Chopsley, you know, with Morgus on television. So Tommy had been there at KTIB for a period of time and had left it not too long before I had gotten there.
Goes to show you KTIB can be the springboard for the stars.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Now, I want to talk about another gentleman who I believe you worked very closely with in sports. Well, back then, people in Thibodeau knew him as Danny Bourne, but the television audience would later know him as Dan Bournet.
Dan Bournet, that's right, sure. Dan was quite a guy.
Now, I understand you two did a lot of baseball together?
Well, we were the first, one of the first stations to start broadcasting the college baseball games. And Dan did the play-by-play, and I was instrumental in selling the package and putting all the information Dan was still a student at Nichols and traveled with the team. And so we had some interesting experiences putting that. The late coach Ray Didier and the athletic director was very instrumental in helping us to put that program together. And it was a great audience because it was for the first time Nichols baseball was on the air.
Now, when Nichols, since back then KTIB was, of course, a daytime-only station, did y'all also do, I know you'd obviously do games on the weekends, but did you also do a lot of them on the weekdays?
Oh, yeah, we tried to do, especially the away games, because we wanted to bring that back home to the people, you know. I remember one interesting situation. Dan could probably tell it better than I, but in some of the, like Northeastern and some of those the colleges in Louisiana that the Nichols would play, the baseball diamonds were a good ways away from telephone lines. In those days, we broadcast on telephone lines. And so they would have to run a special line hookup to the stadium for us to broadcast. And we also needed power. So it turns out that one particular instance, the telephone line was in center field, and the only AC power in the stadium was behind home plate. So we're about 300 feet away. We needed about a 300-foot extension cord and reach our telephone line out in center field. So Dan, being ingenious as he was, he went to one of the stations and rented or borrowed a battery-operated amp to allow us to broadcast the game from center field. And then we learned very quickly to make sure the phone company hooked the telephone line in close to where the AC power was.
Oh, very good, very good. I want to ask you about another gentleman. I believe he was the owner of KTIB at the time, Mr. Block.
Roy Block, yeah. But of course, I worked for him. I came back as I was at KTIB from 62 until 67. Then I went to WTIX. In those days, that was a big rock station in New Orleans. Then I came back as the general manager of KTIB in 1978 or 78, and was there for about 5 years as the manager with Mr. Block. Very fine gentleman, as well as Mr. Ed Jackson, the late Ed Jackson, and they were very, very nice gentlemen to work for.
Okay, let's talk about another gentleman who a lot of us in the Houma Thibodeau area respected a whole lot. He did news, he did information, he spun a lot of records. Roy Vicknair.
Oh, Roy Vicknair. Well, Roy was there when I got there in 62, and we became good friends. And he was a very dependable guy. He used to do the morning show from sign on until noon, and I did noon until sign off. We worked together for quite a few times. We did fairs, we did all sorts of promotions and things like that. It was a great time.
I bet you all the times you're out and about in Thibodeau, you really had a good sense of the community.
One of the great things about my years in Thibodeau is the way that I was received by the community. I got involved with a lot of community events, and was really well received by the people there. I have a warm spot in my heart for the people there in Thibodeau, because they were really wonderful, wonderful people. In fact, my wife is from Thibodeau, so we get back there occasionally.
Okay, and then like you said, you moved on from here to WTIX. At the time, did you work with Robert Mitchell?
Robert Mitchell and I I was the news director at 6. And Robert Mitchell was the morning man, so he and I worked together many, many mornings.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're at KTIB, did you also happen to work with Hugh Smith?
Hugh Smith, yeah. He was there in my second tenure. He was the engineer when I came back as the general manager in the late 70s. When I was there first, there was a gentleman by the name of Sam Eaton. Sam Eaton was there, of course, Lee Martin, who was the original engineer who worked for Mr. Block. And then Sam Eaton came there as the kind of full-time engineer.
Well, there's one gentleman I definitely want to mention who a lot of us know is a great lover of music, and especially Cajun music, Leroy Martin.
Well, Leroy Martin, I remember him from the first day I got to the station. We became real good friends. We worked on a lot of good projects, did a lot of work out on at the various fairs. Each community had its fair, and we'd always do remotes, and everybody was always there looking for Leroy Martin and Vin Bruce and his whole entourage. So he was a wonderful guy. And talked to Leroy not too long ago, and he still sounds great. And so he was a wonderful guy to work with, and became very good friend.
Well, it sounds like you overall got a lot of wonderful memories of a little old station. I guess at the time you worked there, that were they, I guess, in the First Federal Building?
First Federal Building, right on Canal Boulevard. The first time when I came back, they had moved over to the present location. But it was a real neat little location there on First Federal Building, because we had actually a live studio, and then we had the control room studio was right behind us. And then we put the FM station on in later years that was automated, so we were running the AM and FM simultaneously.
Tell all our wonderful listeners what you're doing now.
Well, for the last 26 years, I now work for the Archdiocese of New Orleans. I run a department here for the Archdiocese. My last broadcasting position was a few years ago. The last station I was with was WBYU, when it was still the easy listening station. And I did, for many, many years, I did the evenings and weekends there at WBYU. After leaving TIX, I went on to WWL. I was the general sales manager and general manager of the FM station, which at that time was called Rampart 102. Some people may remember that from many, many years ago. We were in one of the first, one of two FM rock stations, and went from there to the Archdiocese. So that's what I've been doing since then. But still miss broadcasting and still remember well the days of Thibodeau.
Well, very much so. Well, since you do work for the Archdiocese, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about that.
Sure.
Of course, many of our listeners will know for a very long time, Archbishop Philip Hannon oversaw the diocese. He must have been a tremendous person to work for.
He was a good man. In fact, I was there when we first built the TV station, and that was since I had that broadcasting experience. Then I worked along with Jerry Romig, who a lot of people know, to build WLAE-TV, which was the Archdiocesan television station. It went on the air in 1983, and I was with them for a while till it got established, and now I'm back in my department again. I'm a deacon in the church. I'm an ordained deacon in the Catholic Church, and so I run the Acronym office for the Archdiocese.
Wow. Well, one other thing I'd like to ask about, which I do remember, it was probably also a very huge moment for the Archdiocese back in 1987 when the Pope came to town.
That's right, and I was fortunate to serve with the Holy Father. If you look at the reruns, that guy you see standing next to the Holy Father, that's me. And so that was quite a privilege for me to have served as the deacon for the Holy Father in '87 when he celebrated Mass at UNO.
You know, I would like to tell the listeners, and I want to get your reaction while I'm on the phone, there's one very funny story about the Pope's visit to New Orleans, which ironically I got from the Archbishop one day, that in 1987 it was pretty well advertised one of the routes Pope John Paul II was going to take to go to Mass in the Superdome. And there was a lady who flew in from out of town. She found out one of the routes that his, I guess they call it the Pope Mobile, was going to drive on.
Right.
And she rented an apartment in the building for $500 for one day, just that one day. And she was told by a police officer, I believe, that the Pope was going to pass in front of her building at a certain time. So the lady was waiting, and according to her watch, she had a few minutes left before he was scheduled to pass. So she walked down 2 flights of stairs to go buy a hamburger, and by the time she got back upstairs, the Pope had already passed her.
There were a lot of great stories like that. One of them that was always amazing to me, having worked very closely with that visit. All of the big restaurants in New Orleans were vying to serve the Holy Father meals, and so they were all presenting their menus, and people were testing their food and so forth. So one was finally selected, and I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway, the Holy Father arrived at the Archbishop's residence that evening, and they had all these wonderful Louisiana dishes ready to serve him on special china that had been made especially for the occasion. When the Holy Father came, he just took a bowl of soup, some oatmeal, and some toast, and passed up all of that great Louisiana food. So all of his entourage ate like kings, but the Holy Father, bypassed Some of that great Louisiana cooking.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Another story I remember while I got you on was I remember Bill Capel for Channel 4 covered part of the Pope's visit to New Orleans, and he was outside St. Louis Cathedral the day before the Mass in there, I believe, which was only going to be for members of the clergy. And I remember the one unique thing when they first signed on at the remote was there were barricades inside the church along the pews. Thank you. I'll get the word out. And that he told the listeners that the purpose for the barricades was actually to prevent a member of the clergy from accidentally getting excited and going near the Pope.
Well, to keep them out of the main aisle, so they would stay they'd have to use the side aisles to go, in and out of the cathedral, because they didn't want to have just a mob scene, a mob there inside the cathedral itself,
Mm-hmm.
So there were barriers placed on the main aisle, so that the clergy would have to enter from the side aisle and not be able to use the main aisle at all.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And of course, I also remember that visit because the Mass in the Superdome was held September the 12th. The next day, the New Orleans Saints had to play a football game against the Cleveland Browns. And how ironic that the day before, the Pope is giving a Mass before, well over, approaching 100,000 people. And then, ironically, that became the first time the Saints ever had a winning season.
I didn't realize that, but that's a pretty good piece of information.
And so a lot of people thought, well, it had to have been the Pope that finally gave us our first winning season and playoff appearance.
Maybe so. The Saints, of course, were born on All Saints Day, so that's always a good thing to file away to.
Very much so. Well, Mr. Swiler, we greatly appreciate your time.
Jim, I hate to be called Mr., although I'm getting older, but I hate to be called Mr.
No problem there. But
my regards to KTIB. Congratulations to all these years of doing a wonderful job. It's always been a very professional station. I really enjoyed my days there, and I was always very proud to be a member of that staff. So my best to all. Congratulations, and especially to the people of Thibodeau.
Jim Swiler, a solid broadcaster for a solid radio station.